In places like the Philippines, nature's power can just completely change things overnight. And it leaves this constant question, right? How do communities do more than just cope? How do they actually build back stronger, become more resilient? It really calls for a big shift, moving away from just reacting towards, well, actively preparing. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is a special segment from the AI-deas channel, which is part of the Good Business podcast. We're hosted by the PHINMA-DLSU Center for Business and Society. And our whole mission here, as always, is looking at business as a force for good. Just a quick note before we start. This deep dive was actually put together using AI, specifically Notebook LM, to help us explore these complex topics really clearly. Today, we're digging into an article from the Managing for Society column. It's in the Manila Times, and the piece is called Disaster Proofing the Future. So our goal, let's unpack how the Philippines can really boost its disaster risk reduction, how to get beyond just, managing the aftermath. And crucially, why changing a specific law is key to all this. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's such a vital conversation to be having. The Philippines, well, it faces these intense typhoon seasons year after year. And the country's vulnerability, which is only getting worse with climate change, it really demands strategies that are proactive and inclusive, too. The main legal framework we have now is Republic Act 1121. That's the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010.
Right.
But, despite its aims, it has some real limitations, especially when it comes to encouraging solid public-private partnerships, or PPPs.
Okay, so that's the key term, PPPs. Why? Why are these partnerships so critical for disaster resilience, particularly right now with everything we're seeing with the climate?
Well, fundamentally, it comes down to fiscal reality.
Yeah.
The government's fiscal space, basically its budget flexibility is limited.
Especially after the pandemic, I imagine.
Exactly. That really tightened things up. So the government realistically just can't carry the whole load alone. That's where the private sector comes in. They bring, essential resources, often really cutting-edge innovation, and specific expertise that the government might not have. It powerfully complements what the public sector can do. It's not just about money. It's also about capability.
Yeah.
And interestingly, this isn't just a Philippines-specific idea. The 2024 Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, the APM-CDRR, they really hammered home the importance of PPPs for building climate-resilient infrastructure.
Okay.
And while, yes, a lot of current PPPs here are focused on, say, internet connectivity or roads, there are already significant projects happening in areas like water supply, flood control, irrigation.
So the model exists.
The model exists precisely. It just needs to be more deliberately focused on disaster resilience itself.
Okay, so if everyone agrees PPPs are necessary and the model is there, what's stopping them? What's the main hurdle preventing them from being fully woven into disaster planning?
The real weakness in RA 10121, the current law, is that it lacks clear, actionable mechanisms for bringing the private sector in properly.
How so?
Well, the law talks about a comprehensive, integrated, and proactive approach. Great words. But it doesn't spell out how businesses can contribute beyond, the usual post-disaster stuff. Donations, relief goods.
Which is important but limited.
Exactly. It leaves so much potential on the table. Think about prevention, preparedness, mitigation. Businesses have huge capabilities there, engineering, logistics, technology, that go way beyond just writing a check after the storm hits.
Right, so it's about tapping into that before disaster strikes.
Yeah.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then. What are the specific changes being proposed to the law to fix these gaps?
There are a couple of really key amendments being discussed for RA 10121. First, changing Section 2. This would explicitly state that PPPs are a cornerstone of disaster risk reduction.
Making it official policy, basically.
Yes. Emphasizing their role in climate-resilient infrastructure, preparedness programs, even innovative risk financing. It strengthens the whole basis for working together. Second, an amendment to Section 6. This would mandate creating a national PPP framework specifically for disaster risk reduction.
Okay, a framework, what would that do?
It would lay out the specifics, define the roles, the responsibilities, how risks are shared between public and private sectors, and crucially, identify priority areas, things like water systems, flood control, early warning tech. Clear rules make it easier and safer for businesses to get involved meaningfully.
That makes sense. Clear guidelines are key. So that addresses the legal framework. But how do we encourage more actual participation from businesses, moving beyond just those post-disaster donations?
That's where proposed changes to Section 13 come in. The idea is to really broaden the private sector's role. One suggestion is an accreditation system. Businesses that actively participate in DRR, disaster risk reduction, could get accredited. This might incentivize companies to, say, adopt a vulnerable community or fund specific preparedness projects or lend their technical experts for mitigation work.
So like a construction company helping reinforce schools before the typhoon.
Exactly like that. That's the kind of proactive shift we need. It's about building resilience in, not just cleaning up afterwards. And this needs to happen locally, too. So there's a proposed tweak to Section 21. This would empower local government units, LGUs, to allocate their own resources specifically for PPP projects in their areas.
Bringing it down to the community level.
Precisely. Encouraging local partnerships on things like climate-proofing local infrastructure, running training programs. It makes preparedness more targeted and efficient right on the ground.
Okay, let's talk money. Disasters are incredibly expensive. How can involving the private sector help manage that financial burden better? Are there innovative tools?
Yes, definitely. This is where things like innovative risk financing come into play. We're talking about instruments like catastrophe bonds, parametric insurance, and dedicated disaster resilience funds.
Okay, break those down a bit. Catastrophe bonds.
Right. So imagine investors buy these bonds. If a predefined major disaster hits like a super typhoon of a certain intensity, the payout goes directly to fund recovery efforts instead of back to the investors. It basically transfers some of that huge financial risk from the government or communities to the capital markets.
Interesting. And parametric insurance.
That's different from traditional insurance where you assess damage after the event. Parametric insurance pays out automatically and quickly when a specific trigger is met, say wind speeds hit 220 kilometers per hour or rainfall exceeds a certain amount in a specific area.
So faster payouts when they're needed most.
Yeah. Much faster. It gets funds flowing almost immediately. And these kinds of tools, alongside things like resilience funds, can fundamentally change how we manage disaster risk. Moving from, scrambling after the fact to having financial safety nets already in place.
That sounds like a game changer. And thinking bigger picture, all of this must connect to the massive challenge of climate change, right?
Absolutely. It's essential. We have to integrate climate change adaptation right into the law. Disasters are getting more frequent, more intense. Our existing infrastructure often just wasn't built for this new reality.
So how does the law address that?
That proposed amendment to Section 6, the one creating the PPP framework. It should mandate climate-resilient design standards for all disaster risk reduction projects done through PPPs.
Future-proofing the investment?
Exactly. Make sure what we build today can actually withstand the climate of tomorrow. And we need to encourage the private sector to bring innovation here, too. Think renewable energy powering evacuation centers or sustainable climate-smart water systems. It's about aligning our disaster planning with the hard realities of climate change.
It sounds like this isn't just about surviving anymore.
No, it's about learning to thrive in a changed world, building resilience right into the foundations of our communities and infrastructure.
So when you pull it all together, it really sounds like a strong call for, shared responsibility. Everyone has a part to play.
That's precisely it. And that APM-CDRR conference reinforced this too. Planning before disasters happen leads to faster, cheaper recovery. It fits perfectly with the Philippine government's own push for infrastructure resilience. So amending RA 10121 to properly incentivize these PPPs, it's just vital. For protecting communities, yes, but also for protecting businesses themselves. We need mechanisms, maybe tax breaks, public recognition, smoother approval processes to really encourage the private sector to step up. There's even talk of a potential national disaster resilience fund, co-funded maybe by both public and private money to tackle those really big essential projects like major flood control or nationwide early warning systems.
Okay, so bringing this home for everyone listening, what's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean for us?
I think the core message is pretty clear. Making the Philippines disaster management law stronger, especially by building in these robust public-private partnerships, isn't just, a nice idea. It feels like a strategic necessity for the country's future. It's about creating a society that's genuinely proactive, truly resilient, and better equipped to handle the challenges that we know are coming for everyone's safety and stability.
And maybe that leaves us all with a question to think about. What role do you see for businesses in building resilient communities? Not just when disaster hits, but in the day-to-day work of getting prepared and adapting for the long haul.
Something definitely worth considering. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. This has been The Deep Dive, a production of the AI-deas channel under the Good Business Podcast. We're brought to you by the PHINMA-DLSU Center for Business and Society, always exploring business as a force for good. And we'll leave you with this thought: the future depends on what you do today.